What is cracking, everybody? It's Man here, and welcome to another Jumpstart developer interview. Today, I will be interviewing Seon Rozenblum from Sprockets, and we'll be talking about their Kickstarter for Fight the Dragon. How are you doing today, Seon?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, what is Fight of the Dragon?
Fight the Dragon is a mini action RPG, kind of like, think Gauntlet. Did you ever play Gauntlet when you were younger?
I think I've played it before, yes.
Okay, so think Gauntlet, but it also ships with an adventure construction kit. So people can actually create complete scenarios and then share them and publish them with the world for other people to play.
That seems pretty cool. I always like when you have that sort of community with the creation kits. Games like Little Big Planet really use that to their good advantage.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we often kind of explain to people who don't or aren't aware of construction kits or level editors, we say that this is kind of like an RPG style of Little Big Planet. I mean, it gives you the same type of scope where you can actually build complete environments, not just, building a level layout, but you can place enemies and set the behaviors, and you can set up props and hook them up with some logic to make interactive elements and things like that. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
Sounds pretty cool. Now, one of the things that really struck me about Fight of the Dragon was just the aesthetic that you guys chose for the game. It's got this interesting papercraft style to it. What were some of the inspirations and ideas behind going for that sort of style for the game?
Okay. Originally, so we've made the Cubemen series of games. Mm-hmm. So originally we were planning on making a Cubemen style RPG, which has obviously got our signature block-shaped characters. But then we started playing around with different visuals, and to be honest, we're a very small team. We've got 2 developers and a part-time character artist, so we don't really have the scope to work on, the type of the games and build art assets that, teams of 8 or 10 people have got.
Right.
So we had to come up with a particular style that was achievable for us, and while we were working on refining our kind of Cubemen style for the RPG, we came up with this idea of doing low polygon characters, kind of, as you say, kind of almost papercrafty, and then rather than trying to hide the fact that they were low polygon by trying to put bump maps all over them, we decided to actually highlight all the seams on the mesh and make them stand out. So we've actually painted detail into those low polygon areas to kind of come up with what we think is quite a nice, unique style for the characters. So we get the advantage of having a faster and cheaper art production pipeline, but we've also got a really nice style that's become kind of signature to our look of our games.
Mm-hmm. The aesthetic was really cool. I really like the ideas going into it, make it sort of stand out and very unique versus the other sort of games in the action RPG genre.
Well, yeah, we to be honest with you, we're not taking the game seriously in terms of we're not Diablo, where we're trying to make this really dark and serious storyline to a game. Mm-hmm. We're wanting our game to kind of be a lot more fun, a lot more casual. It's about jumping in and just killing a horde of enemies and having fun killing them. Like, rather than sitting there and trying to actually work out the precise way of doing this and doing that without taking damage, we want players to just run in and start hacking and slashing and destroying everything they can. So when I say we're not taking it seriously, we're trying to introduce a slight element, not so much of humour, but of lightheartedness into the game. So our visuals really portray that. We've gone for much stronger, bolder colours on our characters. We're not trying to make our characters kind of disappear into the environment. We're trying to make our enemies obvious to find and fun to kill. So I think then again that comes across with our art style and especially our animation style. We're not trying to be physically accurate with our character movements and stuff. We're trying to keep it quite enjoyable and lighthearted.
Well, so far that's really come across to me, and it's nice to see a game that's more for fun than trying to be all dark and gritty like a lot of games try to be these days.
Sure. Well, that came across, I mean, as I mentioned, that was twofold. One is we just don't have the scope to build a game like that. We don't have the manpower or the budget, but we also wanted to do something a little bit different. So with our previous Cubemen games, which are tower defense style games, we kind of mixed up the tower defense genre by having things like movable men instead of towers. Mm-hmm. So with this RPG, with Fight the Dragon, we're trying to come up with, again, something that breaks the mold a little bit. We have a 3D camera. You can rotate the camera around, which is pretty much something you don't do in an action RPG. They're always locked off camera perspectives. We don't do the silhouette of characters behind walls. Right? If you actually walk behind a wall, you can't see yourself. You need to rotate the camera. We're trying to do things slightly different to make the game stand out. And I think we've achieved that. We've definitely achieved that.
Now, you've talked a little bit about Cubemen before, and Cubemen was the series that Three Sprockets originally started from. What has it been like working on Fight of the Dragon, which is a much bigger, at least from what I have seen of it so far, it seems like a much bigger game and much more in-depth game than the Cubemen series was. How different is it working from Cubemen to working on Fight of the Dragon?
Yeah, it's been very, very different. I mean, in terms of obviously scope, it's a much longer production period. Cubemen 1 was actually built just by me. Cubemen 2 was built half by me, and then I brought another developer on to help me out because I just wasn't really coping with the workload. But it was still only a 7-month production. With Fight the Dragon, this is, we'll probably end up going for about 16 or 17 months by the time we finish the game. So it's obviously costing a lot more. It's taking much longer to work on, and obviously the scope is bigger with all the characters and animations, and there's a lot of features we haven't put in yet. But also the construction kit is like 1,000 times more advanced than anything we've done before inside a Cubemen game. So it's been an interesting journey. We decided from the start that we were going to keep the feature set really loose, let it adapt, and let it evolve, which is it's quite an expensive way to make a game, but it also you end up with the best product doing that. The other thing we did was just embrace the feature creep. Every time we came up with a really cool idea, we thought to ourselves, okay, this is going to change a lot and possibly cause us to recreate some content in the game, but will it make the game better? And if the answer was yes, we did it. We didn't even argue. We didn't kind of second guess. We just jumped in and added those features. So a lot of the functionality inside our editor, for instance, we rewrote 7 or 8 times as we thought of new and cool ways of doing things or faster ways that people can create levels. It's definitely been an interesting journey. That there was no locked off feature set like there was with Cubemen. With Cubemen 2, we said we wanted to do everything we did in Cubemen 1 and add, these 15 things. But with Fight the Dragon, it was a completely open page when we started development.
So it sounds like you're really ramping up for this game. And it's really cool to see the progression that you guys have gone from you working by yourself on Cubemen 1, which was an interesting game from what I've seen. I've unfortunately not had the chance to play the Cubemen series. But I do know of it, and even though the original one was pretty simple and the second one was more advanced, it was still kind of simple, you can definitely see that the game was progressing and that you guys were getting better at what you were doing. So seeing the 3 Sprockets evolve throughout the series and now with Fight of the Dragon is a really cool thing to watch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an enjoyable process. I can't say that my stress levels are as low as they were when I was working on Cubemen. It's obviously we're investing a lot of time and money in Fight the Dragon. We're not sure. To be honest with you, our Kickstarter campaign really hasn't taken off that well, which is fairly disappointing for us. And it's not that we're not converting well, it's just that we're not getting any eyes on the project. Our actual page views are really, really low compared to where we thought it would be. And it could just be because of Christmas. There could be lots of different reasons why. Yeah. But
I've heard it's a very difficult time to have a Kickstarter around the holiday season because people don't necessarily have a lot of money to send to other things besides family members.
For sure, and it's something that we were aware of before we launched. But to be honest, we actually contacted Kickstarter and spoke to them about their data points for this time last year. And we're kind of, I won't say we were guided by them because obviously they said, look, you need to decide when you want to launch your Kickstarter. It's totally up to you. But all the research we did showed that there was no impact in the holiday period last year when it came to, pledging on Kickstarter campaigns. But I guess this Christmas period is a different time to last year. It's definitely been an interesting journey. As I said, the stress levels are pretty high just in general on development, and add a Kickstarter to that, and it's definitely been an interesting journey for me.
How much money are you guys looking to raise for this Kickstarter?
Look, we're looking to raise $50,000, which we thought was going to be quite achievable. It's obviously all the money that we make from our Cubemen sales goes directly back into Fight the Dragon. So Fight the Dragon's been completely self-funded by me up until this point. Put every single cent that the company's got into it, plus, my staff get to work 5 days a week, 8-9 hours a day, which is great. And I kind of work 7 days a week and 14 or 15 hours a day to kind of make up the difference to get the game out the door. So I'm putting everything in, blood, sweat, and tears, and all the money we've got. The Kickstarter money was really just to help us accelerate the process, bring some more artists on board, bring some more people on board to actually get more content finished. Because obviously, from a coding point of view, we're tackling the game quite well. But from an art content point of view, there's so much more we want to put in the game before we ship. Heaps more props to go into the editor, more enemies, more weapons, more loot, all that type of thing. And that takes time, unfortunately. It takes time and manpower to get those things done. So we thought, the $50,000 target would be quite achievable for us. I think we're sitting at just over 11% at the moment after about 10 days. So that's a little bit disappointing.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to kickstart your Kickstarter here for you.
Cool.
So Fight of the Dragon is going to be an action RPG, and we've seen quite a few of action RPGs, anything from The Legend of Zelda to other games in that genre. But what sort of mechanics will Fight of the Dragon have, and is it going to try to branch out from the sort of Legend of Zelda Link to the Past mechanics and do something a bit more unique, or will it be more of a traditional action RPG?
It's going to be, in terms of combat, it's more of a traditional action RPG. You've got your ability to chain combos, light attacks, you've got heavy attacks, where at the moment we don't have any classes in the game, and we're not sure that we're going to add classes because we don't really see how they fit within the game. What we've done instead is made the game very much about loot, and what you do is you shape your character's abilities based on the loot that you equip them with. So all characters can wield magic, I should say, and magic actually, in our case, works off your shield, which is kind of a unique take on the mechanic. So basically, you equip different types of shields. You've got fire shields, you've got electric shields, you've got ice shields, things like that. And the shield itself gives you different magical abilities. So you collect shields just like you collect different type of weapons, and each shield will give you slightly different abilities with different modifiers and different power of magic. So we're trying to stay away from the classes and the tech trees and keep it pure hack and slash. Mm-hmm. What we've also, we've got, your basic things like, dodge rolling and stuff like that. But there's a couple of unique things we're doing in the game. We've actually got height in the game. You're not always just walking on the ground. You can climb onto the environment, depending on what the creators do with the levels, which means you've got the ability to do more interesting type puzzles or exploration within a level. So the character itself will automatically climb as you push towards a climbable tile. He'll also automatically jump between tiles if there's a jumpable space in front of them. So it's not a dexterity game. There's no jump button. There's no climb button. It'll just automatically navigate for you based on the direction you're pushing the character. So we're trying to allow the player to have free exploration without having to be quite agile, in terms of their playing capability. But we're also trying to allow the additional exploration to the game that you don't normally get inside a hack and slash or an RPG. Mm-hmm. So people can, for instance, hide loot behind or inside an area that you can't see, and you actually have to go and explore and find it by rotating the camera and covering all the area of the level rather than just going to the areas that you can visually see.
I like that idea of being able to control the camera, since a lot of RPGs in general end up being sort of this isometric view that you can't really move the camera around, and if you move behind a wall, they either have the wall will go invisible, or sometimes you just can't even see what's going on. So I like the idea of being able to move the camera around. That's got add a lot of extra time, since you have to detail your props in 360 degrees instead of just one angle.
Absolutely. It's going to take a little bit more time for creators to build environments, but it's also going to mean they can do a lot more interesting things. They're not stuck to that locked perspective. Mm. So we think that's going to be quite cool. The other things that we've got that are they're not unique to the genre, but we're doing them differently. Is we're introducing split screen local co-op back into the game. We think that split screen isn't done enough these days. All the latest games that are coming out do all that fancy, multi-character in the same screen thing, and mm-hmm. dividing the screen on angles like you see in some of the Lego games. But we just wanted the old school split screen that you used to get in games before that type of technology came about. So and it's probably the most fun thing that we play in the office when we're playtesting the game right now.
Hmm.
Is no matter what happens, one of the developers might be sitting here testing something that they just implemented, and someone else will run up and pick up the second controller and just jump in the game and have a play. It's quite a lot of fun.
So will it just be the two-player split screen, or you have 3, 4 players as well?
Just two players for the screen. At the end of the day, we're targeting desktop first,
Hmm.
and most people don't have two controllers, let alone four controllers. Or some people, might only have one controller. So we can do split screen between keyboard, mouse, and a controller. We don't split between two people on the same keyboard. So you need to be using at least one controller. The other problem is you've got screen real estate space issues.
Hmm.
So what we've done with our split screen is if, for instance, one person goes into the inventory, it doesn't block the other player. The game still keeps going, and the other player can keep actually running around and doing things, which means you can also take damage when you go into your inventory. So we're deliberately trying to make the game non-blocking, but that also means that that's going to restrict us in how many local players we can have. But we've also got 4-player online co-op, so you can actually play 4 players within the same environment. And you'll be able to host your own games, you'll be able to play on the LAN as well as over the internet.
Well, that's nice to hear that you still got online for people who don't necessarily have someone to play local, and you have local for some people who don't necessarily have people to play online. It's really nice to see a game that does that kind of thing. Because a lot of times nowadays you'll either get a game that does one, or you'll get a game that does the other. Rarely do you see one that does both.
Well, we set ourselves a goal for both, and we didn't realize just how hard split screen was really going to be. It seemed like it was actually a really quick thing. I actually implemented it over the weekend initially. We had a chat on a Friday afternoon. We kind of have a end of week catch up every Friday afternoon, and I brought up the whole split screen thing, and we all ummed and ahed and thought, yeah, look, it might be nice to have in there, but I don't know how important it is. And we kind of left the conversation that way. And by Monday morning, all the staff came in, and I showed them split screen in the game, and they were kind of, the jaws hit the floor, and then from there all the trouble started, because all the things that we'd done in the game was broken, and all the things we had to plan going forward had to support both single and split screen. So twice as much UI and how do you treat different controllers, and what's if someone drops in and drops out. It was an interesting challenge, but it was definitely the best thing we did in the game. It's as I said, it's by far the most enjoyable part of playing the game at the moment.
I can understand that'd be very difficult if you didn't actually build the game to run as 2 players, to then have to figure out how to make the game understand that there are 2 players there.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where you just end up throwing out much of the code that you've already written, and you start from scratch again. But again, as I said at the very start of this interview, that there's lots of times that we thought to ourselves, okay, that this is a really cool thing, and it has to be in the game no matter what. And we then just took the punches and made whatever changes we need to make to implement it.
So, you've mentioned that the level editor a lot, that you're really focusing with Fight of the Dragon for creating your own levels. How easy do you think it is to use the level editor? What all can be edited? I've worked with level editors before, anything from Little Big Planet to working within the Source engine, and both of them, they have things that are easy with them, and they have things that are very complicated with them. So, let's talk about the editor a bit, and what all you can do and how easy it is to work with.
Okay, sure. So the first thing we thought of when we came up with the editor, or the first rule we set ourselves, was that it had to be really intuitive to work with. With our Cubemen level editors, they were quite simplistic in the things that you could do with it. So there wasn't a huge range of scope for us to make it overly intuitive. But with Fight the Dragon, we wanted to, firstly, it had to be completely controller capable, which is a big challenge. Not just from the point of view of actually navigating inside the environment, but all the UI had to work with the controller as well as mouse and keyboard. So what a lot of companies do is they actually build for mouse and keyboard, and then they kind of wrangle it to work with the controller. We went the other way around, and for the first 4 or 5 months of development, you couldn't even use a mouse and keyboard at all in the game, whether it's the editor or in gameplay. It was only controller. We made sure it was a first-class citizen. So what we ended up with was an editor that was really, really intuitive to use. You can do things like multi-select tiles or props and copy and paste whole chunks of levels around rather than having to build everything uniquely from scratch. We've got the ability to duplicate a level, like, so you can take something you've already built and then expand on it as a new level. You've got full control of sculpting your environments and placing props, and some props are rotatable, some props are sit on the side of a wall and you can move them up and down or choose which side they sit on. Everything is previewed real time. So if you're, for instance, placing a light source in the game, like let's say an urn with a fire in it, it actually shows you real time that urn in the fire as you're moving around and placing it, so you can see what the exact result's going to be while you're editing. Placing enemies in the level, you'll be able to place, what type of enemy, where they are, what their behaviour is, whether they follow a patrol path. You can actually map out, with the mouse or keyboard or the controller, what their path's going to be, in which direction they're moving. You can decide if they're defending their spot, or if they automatically go and attack the player. You can visually see the range that they've got, their wake-up range and attack range. We've got things like environment effects, where you can add snow or rain to a level and what percentage of rain there is, so you can do, dark, murky type environments that are raining during gameplay. We've got the ability to set the time of day, so a player can turn around and say, I want this to be a daytime level, or I want this to be a nighttime level. And there's a whole range of, different textures that they can choose when they're actually painting the environment, from, rocks and stone to dirt and grass, and we've got some carpets and marble and all sorts of things that they can actually paint with. So creators can actually build quite a vast range of different types of environments, from dungeons to castles to outdoor environments to ruins to basically anything they can think of.
Have you had any thoughts of it and concluding any sort of modding capabilities, such as people being able to import their own enemies or their own textures or anything like that?
So from a player customization point of view for in-game, we're going to hook up the ability for people to actually create their own skins for their characters, and also character heads. They'll be able to customize or create their own character heads. But the editor itself, and for enemies and props and stuff, we're not planning anything right now. The main reason is we need to keep things compatible between all the different platforms we're going to go to. So one of the challenges we had with our Cubemen games, which has obviously a level editor and different skins and things, was that because it's available on all different platforms, and none of those platforms have any mechanic of sharing data or recognizing a user. So for instance, if you've got Cubemen on iOS and you have Cubemen on Steam, there's no way that we can link you to be on iOS and Steam as the same person, because there's no way of tracking you between that. So we don't have a mechanism that allows people to actually share their content and access their content no matter where they are. Now, if we were just launching on Steam, that wouldn't be a problem, because we could just use Steam Workshop and hook everything in that way. But as soon as we start delivering DARE and free builds on desktop, and then we start looking at consoles, we've got no way of connecting that data or sharing that data. So if you imagine you build a level and you put your own custom props inside that level and then go share that level can't be played by anyone else, because they don't have access to any of your data.
Right.
It's a real challenge. It's something that I wish we could solve. I wish there was a solution for. There are obviously things we could do. We could, be running our own backend that manages all these type of things, kind of simulating what Steam does with Workshop, and share data that way. But that's just a huge amount of work for us. That would be as much work as us making this game to start with, just to be able to deliver those capabilities. So it's definitely on our radar. We know people are going to want it. If we can find a solution, we're going to start off, as I said, small, with character customization and heads, things like that. And if we can find a way of starting to introduce the ability for people to mod and add their own content, we definitely will. It's something we'd love to do. We're not against it. We're all for it. It's got to be feasible, and it's got to be compatible with all our different platforms that we're going to ship to.
Right. Because that was something I was wondering about when I saw that Fight of the Dragon was actually approved to be on Steam, and then I heard about the level creator. I was wondering if it was going to be introduced to the Steam Workshop.
Yeah, so as I said, the character heads and skins and stuff we will do that through Workshop, and we'll have to see how that pans out on different platforms. It's the biggest problem we've got right now is that console providers, for instance, don't really play nicely with other people. When you publish something on a Sony platform, they kind of make you stay inside the Sony ecosystem, and the same with Microsoft. Nintendo are being a bit more flexible now, and there are rumors that Sony are being a bit more flexible, but at the end of the day, there's still no way of connecting the two. There's no way. I mean, if you publish a level and no one could play it unless they're on Steam, that would be kind of disappointing.
Right.
We don't want to, access to content that people create. But we'll see. It's early days still. And one thing I should mention is that, like with our Cubemen games, I mean, we did about 30 updates of Cubemen 1 post-release. Like for a whole year, we're pushing updates out. And with Cubemen 2, we've pushed out 3 or 4 updates already. When Fight the Dragon launches at version 1, it's not the end of the project. It's just the start of the project. We'll keep more features and more things and more content. And if we find a way of allowing people to mod, then we'll definitely push that out post-release.
What are some of the things that you can make in the creator? Is the level creator going to be like what you guys use to make your levels, like they had with Little Big Planet and Super Meat Boy to an extent, in which the editor that they released to the public was the same editor that was used to make the game for the most part?
Absolutely. The editor that we're releasing in-game is the exact tool we use to build all the adventures that we're going to ship with. So it's not the tool we use to build the game, it's the tool we use to actually build what we call adventures or levels. So anything that we can put inside an adventure, players will be able to put inside an adventure. And anything that we want the capability to do ourselves, that'll automatically go in for the players. So as I said earlier on, we're really excited about what people are going to produce with it, because our experience with level creators with our Cubemen series is that the community always builds stuff that's way, way better than what we do. No matter how much effort we put in and no matter how crazy our ideas are, within weeks of our editor going live to the public, people are producing stuff that's beyond our wildest dreams. So we're expecting the same thing's going to happen again with Fight the Dragon. So we're focusing on making sure that we've got really cool things that people can do, and what they're going to do with it, we have no idea. We expect that there's going to be obviously a big mix of average adventures that are built, and a good selection of really, really interesting adventures too. And players when they're playing the game will be able to actually rate thumbs up or thumbs down on all the adventures they're playing. So there's kind of like a rating system, and they'll also have the capability of reporting a level. So for instance, we're not restricting what players do when they're creating a level. For instance, they can place NPCs inside their level and put dialogue snippets on the NPCs. Now, we're not going to prevent them from putting profanity in, because we kind of strongly believe in letting the community vet the community. But at the end of the day, we'll have reporting tools that people, if they are offended or if they think a level is broken, they can't complete it, they'll be able to actually report that, and we'll track all that, and we'll take action on those things.
That's one of the things I was wondering when I first started Level Creator is, just because the game has a level creator and it lets anybody access it, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to get a lot of really good levels out of it, and there's people out there who will purposefully either make bad levels or just publish nothing. That happened a lot in Little Big Planet. I remember they would just publish nothing. Just blank levels. So I was wondering if you would have like a rating system or something. And it's nice to see that you do have that implemented.
For sure. And creators won't be able to publish nothing, and there'll be some basic minimum requirements they have to accomplish to be able to publish something. And they have to actually have played through their adventure before they publish. So it needs to be finishable. But that doesn't prevent people from publishing really badly built levels. A big open flat plane with a start and an end and no enemies in the middle. If they want to do that, they can do that. We can't really prevent them from doing it. But the community themselves will curate the content. And I think that very quickly all the bad content will go to the bottom and all the good content will go to the top. What we're also planning on doing once we launch is we'll manually vet the first 100 or so levels that come through and just make sure they're really high quality. We'll kind of prioritize them just to make sure that, everyone's first experience when they're playing a game will be a good experience. Of course, we're shipping our own levels with the game as well, so that'll also, we'll throw those levels in with the mix with everyone else. So everyone will always get to see the top of the content at the top of the heap.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you, me too.
So let's talk about you for a moment, being somebody who, from what it sounds like, you basically built 3 Sprockets by yourself, making the original Cubemen by yourself, and then eventually the company grew into what it is today. This is something that I usually like to ask any developers I interview. What is it that made you want to make games? When was it that you decided you wanted to make games, and how did you go from just saying I want to make games to actually releasing Cubemen out to the public, to the world, for everyone to play and enjoy?
I've actually had quite an interesting journey. This is my second time round as an independent developer. I I guess, like a lot of developers, I always wanted to make games. When I was young, I didn't even know you could make games. I thought they were built by these big corporations somewhere, or I actually had no idea how they were built. I just used to play them and love them. So in about 1995, I started a company called Sector 3, which was an animation company, and also here in Melbourne, Australia. And we used to do TV commercials and effects and stuff like that. And I dabbled in making games in that company with Flash and Macromedia Director, some pretty bad tools for building games, and couldn't quite get anything working. And it was always kind of like a little side thing. I kept revisiting it every couple of years to see, okay, can I make games yet? Can I make games yet? And then one day I found Unity, the Unity game engine. This is in 2006. And everything changed for me. And within a year, so by end of 2007, I had shipped two games, my first two games for that company, which was Turret Wars and Stuntmania, and had shut down my office, had fired all my clients, had let go of all my staff, and set up an indie studio at home in my garage, making games full time. And I did that for about 2.5 years, and was mildly successful with it. Obviously I was doing well enough to pay the bills and keep going. And then in 2009, I sold that company to another games company here in Melbourne, a console game company. And after about 12 months or 16 months of working with them and everything else, I decided, you know what? I really, really wanted to just be an indie just by myself. That's all I want to do. So I left there and started up 3 Sprockets. And had this idea I had made a tower defense game before and loved tower defense type games, and as I said, had this idea of mixing up the genre, kind of melding tower defense and real-time strategy into one type game. And out of that, Cubemen was born. And it was, we got on Steam and had a huge launch on iOS, and it turned out to be a really successful game, the biggest game I'd ever made and launched, which was fantastic, and kind of set me up to start working on Cubemen 2, which I did, and as I explained, got some help in, and now leads me to where I am now with Fight the Dragon. So it's really been an interesting journey. I've always wanted to make games and have had the opportunity to do it twice now with 2 different companies. What I've learned about myself is that I definitely want to be an independent developer. I'm not interested in making other people's games. I'm not really interested in making, or doing client work. If I'm not working on the game I want to be making and I want to be playing, then I'm kind of not interested in being in the space. So that also has its own challenges because, of course, you need to pay for that yourself. If you're not doing client work, you're not making other people's games, your only income comes from your own games. And that's definitely a challenge. And just because I like a game doesn't mean other people are going to like that game, or it doesn't mean it's going to sell well. So it's all, you're always kind of second guessing yourself. But I'm definitely happy to be back as an independent game developer again. And I'm not sure if I would have ever got to Cubemen or Fight the Dragon if I wouldn't have gone on the journey that I've gone on. So it's definitely been fun.
I can definitely understand you wanting to be on your own and do your own thing and not have to worry about someone always telling you how to make what you want to make or forcing you to make something that you don't necessarily want to. Because if you don't want to make it, then you're probably not going to put your all into it, and you'll end up making a product that you don't necessarily like but will just be sold anyway.
Well, everyone says it in the industry. If you're not passionate about the game you're making, that'll come through in the end product. So that's the same thing. If you're making something that you don't want to be playing yourself, then you're going to not put the same type of effort in that you would normally. I mean, I've got developer friends who say to me all the time, why don't you look at doing something more in this space, like the free-to-play space, or, taking on this type of genre. Look at what's hot at the moment and try to build something in that space. And if it's not a game that I would play myself, if it's something I'd move away from, then I just can't do it. You know, look. I'll be honest. I like making money. I definitely like making money by making games. Making money means I can keep my family fed and I can keep making games. So we all kind of work to earn money, but I'm not prepared to put money before what I'm working on. It's got to be the right game for me. Otherwise, it's, you know, I mean, as I said, Fight the Dragon is going to be a 16-month plus production, and I work 7 days a week. You can't do that and maintain that if you're working on something that you're not interested in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely understandable, and it's interesting to hear how you went from your other animation company and actually built not only this 3 Sprockets, but built up 2 companies making independent games and actually being able to be out there and do what you really want to do.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's definitely been an interesting journey. It's had as many lows as it's had highs, and that's okay. It's, you know, part of life. But it's all a learning experience. And as you alluded to earlier on, and obviously our projects are getting better since Cubemen 1. You know, we're working on bigger games and bigger scope, and now, you know, from a coder point of view, I'm a much better coder today than I was, you know, 2-3 years ago or even 6 years ago. Having more people on the team means you get much more diversity inside the game scope, as well as the capabilities of the team. So it's definitely a growing journey. I try not to reflect too much back on the past, but I'm definitely enjoying what I'm doing right now.
But what kind of price do you think we're going to expect when Flight of the Dragon does release?
We haven't really decided. We'd like to say we're going to be at the $20 price point. It's really hard to say. There seemed to be a bit of a shift in the indie game space at the moment in terms of pricing. A lot of the independent developers are trying to push their prices up. You know, there was this big race to the bottom on mobile, and even on desktop for a little while there was a big race to the bottom. You know, there was a while on Steam where you couldn't buy a game for less than, you know, $10, and then all of a sudden, you know, $6 and $5 games started creeping in, and then $3 and $2 games started creeping in. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of developers now. If you look at, you know, Kerbal Space Program that came out at, was it $25, and there's some $30 and $40 indie titles on Steam now. We need to make, you know, we don't want to sell the game for nothing, or we don't want to sell the game for too low. There's obviously a lot of work and value inside the game, and we want to set a realistic price point that kind of says this is what the game is really worth, this is what its value is, and we think $20 is the price point.
Seems like a pretty good price point, especially with things nowadays. About $15, $20 seems to be the price point that's been going around recently, so that doesn't seem too bad. You've talked about that you will have a release for desktop. I imagine that you'll be Windows. Do you have ideas for Linux or Mac, or what consoles you guys have ideas for coming out for?
We're definitely launching Windows, OS X, and Linux. We always do. Desktop for us means all platforms on desktop. Mm-hmm. So that'll be day one. All our alpha tier and beta tier will have access to all those 3 platforms. In terms of console, we're Sony developers, and we're also Nintendo developers. So those 2 are options for us. We're kind of not announcing anything on console right now. Obviously, we would love to have Fight the Dragon on console. Steam, we can self-publish now that we're on Steam. But with consoles, there's lots of discussions with the platform holders, and lots of logistics for us to iron out in terms of licensing and things like that. So we definitely want to be going console. Just nothing to announce yet. In terms of mobile space, this is our first game in a long time that we're actually not launching mobile at the start. We may consider mobile for Fight the Dragon. We just don't know yet. The mobile space has become really difficult. You've got the premium space really isn't worth a lot of money these days, because everything's kind of moved to the free to play space.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing.
And the other problem is we're really restricted in terms of what we can do with the game in the mobile space, because we don't have any capability of restricting devices. So, for instance, we can't turn around and make a game that's for the iPad 4 and the iPad Air and say, well, anything below that you can't play on, because Apple don't actually give you that capability. So if we want to ship the game to the iPad Air and the iPad 4, it also has to run on the iPad 2. And there's just no way Fight the Dragon's going to run on the iPad 2. So the hardware's just too old. So again, with our Cubemen series, we the scope of the game was restricted by all the platforms it was going to ship on. Where with Fight the Dragon, we said, no, we're shipping desktop first, and this is a desktop game, and we're going to make sure the capabilities are worthy of a desktop game, both from our the visuals and like we've got hundreds and hundreds of dynamic shadow casting light sources in the game, and we didn't want to compromise the look and feel or power of the editor, for instance, just because we're going to ship it on mobile as well. So mobile may happen, it may not. We'll have to look at it post-release.
All right, well, thank you for joining me today, Seon from 3 Sprockets, to talk about your game Fight of the Dragon, your Kickstarter for that game. Do you have any contacts that people can use to follow yourself or the game as it develops? Facebook, Twitter, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Our Twitter account is at 3 Sprockets. That's the number 3. And we've actually got a Fight the Dragon developer website, so it's fightthedragon.com. And on there's the screenshots and videos and a bit of as I said, a developer blog. There's also 3sprockets.com website. And on Facebook, there's Facebook/FightTheDragon and Facebook/3Sprockets. Plus our Kickstarter page, of course, which I'm sure you'll have a link to.
Yep. All the links to that will be in the description of the video. Is there anything you would like to say, anything you would like to add that we didn't go over before we wrap this up?
No, other than I hope everyone's has a look at the project, and if you like what you see, please help us out by backing us. We'd really appreciate it, and spread the word to everyone you know. And even if it's something that you're not interested in yourself, if you know someone else that might be, please spread the word to those people as well. We really need to get our Kickstarter across the line.
Well, thank you again for talking to me today, Seon. Thank you, viewers, for watching. All the links to everything will be in the description of the video. Do be sure to check this Kickstarter out. So far, the game sounds pretty cool. And I will talk to you guys later.